When Peter Warner, a fisherman living in Tonga, one day on his way home made a little detour, he spotted the small island of ʻAta. It had been deserted of people since 1863, when the tribe living there had been tricked, kidnapped, and sold into slavery. Since then, ʻAta had been deserted of people. The village that was left behind was still standing, but now it was a ghost village, cursed and forgotten. Suddenly, Peter noticed something on the island, a flash of light or something. He looked through his binoculars and saw a fire on the green cliffs, before suddenly seeing a naked boy, with long bushy hair, jumping from a cliff and swimming towards him. More naked boys started appearing, screaming for help. When the first boy came close to the boat, he shouted in perfect English,
"My name is Stephen. There are 6 of us, and we reckon we've been here 15 months.
In total, 6 boys had come swimming and climbed into his fishing boat. The boys said they were students at a boarding school in Tonga and had decided to take a fishing boat out, but was caught in a storm. Warner now called Nuku'alofa in Tahiti over his radio and told what had happened, saying,
I've got 6 kids here who say they have been marooned on an island for 15 months.
The operator told him to wait while he checked who these boys could be. 20 long minutes went by, before a very emotional operator came on the radio and said,
You found them! These boys have been given up for dead, funerals have been held. If it's them, it's a miracle!
This is the incredible and true story of the 6 castaway boys that survived 15 months, marooned on a deserted island, and why they didn't turn into Lord of the Flies. I first read Lord of the Flies when I was a teenager and became fascinated with the story and soon watched both movie versions. And even though Lord of the Flies is a fictional story, I had no trouble imagining that the outcome in the book would be much like what would happen in real life. While pondering if something similar had ever happened in real life, I came over this incredible story. But first, a short recap of the Lord of the Flies story. A plane with some British schoolboys goes down and leaves the boys stranded on an uninhabited island. At first they can't believe their luck, nothing but beaches and ocean around them, but most important of all, no adults. It starts off well, and the boys elect Ralph over Jack as their leader in a sort of democratic election.
Sir, are you the leader? Jack's the oldest. But Ralph's the colonel. I think it should be Ralph. Ralph. Yeah, he's a colonel. I vote for Ralph. Yeah.
In well-told stories we usually get hints of what is going to happen later, and the first example of this is when Jack says,
Yeah, Ralph. Yeah, he's a colonel. I vote for Ralph. Yeah, Ralph. He's Colonel Ralph.
I guess she just won the election.
He could have said congratulations, or cheered for Ralph when he won, but instead he says something else using the words, guess you won, hinting that this election result won't matter later. This is because Jack, the leader of the choir boys, isn't too pleased and feels humiliated by the election defeat. To try to compensate, Ralph makes the choir boys the hunters, in charge of hunting the pigs they have found on the island. As the newly elected leader, Ralph lists 3 things as the most important for the boys: have fun, survive, and make smoke signals for passing ships. Piggy finds a conch in the water, and Ralph makes the conch rule: only the boy holding the conch can speak, and only Ralph can interrupt the one who holds the conch. The conch becomes a symbol in the story, a symbol of civilization and order. But that symbol is quickly quenched when a young boy asks what Ralph is going to do about the snake or beast thing that the boys think is on the island. Ralph says there is no beast, but Jack says the choir boys, or the hunters as they now are called, will look for it while hunting. And this seemingly innocent remark creates the first divide between the two. The boys can now either deal with this Ralph's way, conquering their fears through reason, or through Jack's way, which is to say, we are a tribe, we are hunters, and together we are strong enough to hunt the beast. But things don't go as planned, and the boys are more interested in feasting and frolicking than in tending the fire they made to signal a passing ship. Jack and Ralph get into an argument, because both of them are trying to do something important, but both are frustrated that they are not getting enough help and neither can make the other one understand. A boy named Roger follows one of the youngest boys, Henry, when he walks down and into the water. Roger starts throwing rocks at him, but misses him on purpose, but it becomes clear that injuring or killing the young boy is exciting to Roger. Meaning, at least one of the boys is a sociopath, and with no grown-ups around to enforce the rules, there is only a matter of time or circumstance before Roger realizes he can kill. Jack and the hunters now starts to paint their faces and do primitive hunting dances, in hope of increasing their luck during hunting. This becomes a powerful symbol for all the boys on the island, making them feel empowered, tribal and as fierce warriors. They are no longer scared boys lost at a deserted island, they are now hunters and warriors. Jack manages to kill a pig and bring meat to the tribe, as they identify themselves as now. But, while hunting, Jack and the other hunters forget to keep the fire going, and soon all the boys discovers that a ship, that could have seen the fire while passing, now disappears into the horizon. Ralph confronts Jack about this failure and in this way, humiliates him again, even though he was the one that managed to bring food to the tribe.
If you guys had let the goddamn fire go out, they would have seen it. Hey man, we were hunting. Gray killed a pig. Face it, Jack, you fucked up. We could have been rescued. Back off, man, I'm sick of your shit and so's my gang. Your gang? What's that supposed to mean? What it means, Colonel, is that if you know what's good for you, you'll stop trying to run everything.
The conflict between the two now tears the tribe apart and they split into two groups. While one tribe is painting their faces and engaging in primitive ritual dances, becoming primal human beings, killing a boy while in their primal frenzy. While the other boys is trying to stay, well, normal. Piggy is later killed by a stone thrown to his head, when he tries to reason with the hunters, and Ralph is now alone and being hunted by the others. In an effort to flush Ralph out, Jack sets fire to the forest on the island and forces Ralph out of his hiding place. The island is a smoldering wasteland and 3 of the boys are dead. Ralph runs for his life and falls down a hill and lands in front of a soldier, whose unit has been sent to investigate the fire on the island. The officer says,
"I should have thought that a pack of British boys would have been able to put up a better show than that."
At this, Ralph bursts into tears. The book ends with the words,
Ralph wept for the end of innocence, and for the darkness of man's heart.
This story of course never happened. William Golding, an English schoolmaster, made up this story in 1951, and his novel Lord of the Flies would sell tens of millions of copies and is hailed as one of the classics of the 20th century. In hindsight, the secret to the book's success is clear. Golding had a masterful ability to portray the darkest depths of mankind. But what happened in real life, when 6 boys became castaways like the boys in the book? The real Lord of the Flies began in June 1965, when 6 boys, Sione, Stephen, Kolo, David, Luke and Mano, pupils at a strict Catholic boarding school in Nuku'alofa, came up with a cunning plan.
I've got a plan so cunning you could put a tail on it and call it a weasel.
Nuku'alofa is a small island with only 900 inhabitants, so not much happens there. Bored out of their mind, they came up with a plan to kill their boredom. They planned to borrow a boat and head for Fiji, or maybe even New Zealand. All the boys were between 13 and 16 years old at the time, and Mr. Tanyela Uhila, a local fisherman, that they all thought was a real butt opening, had a boat they could borrow. They packed 2 sacks of bananas, a few coconuts and a small gas burner for the journey, but not being seasoned sailors, it didn't occur to any of them to bring a map or a compass. They left the harbor in the evening without being noticed, and soon headed in the direction of Fiji. But that night the boys made a grave mistake. They all fell asleep and a few hours later they awoke to waves crashing down over the boat. They hoisted the sail, but the wind promptly tore that to shreds. Mano said in an interview,
We drifted for 8 days, without any food or water. We managed to collect some rainwater and hollowed out coconut shells, and we shared it equally between us, each taking a sip in the morning and another in the evening.
Then on the 8th day, they saw a miracle on the horizon. A small island, not a tropical paradise, but a hulking mass of rock. According to Toto, he was the first to swim for the island.
We did not get to the island until nighttime, in the dark, so I had to swim ashore. I told the boys, we have to say a prayer first before I jump into the sea.
Despite the fact that the reef was not far from the boat, Toto said he had a very hard time reaching the island, because he was so weak from 8 days without any food and very little water.
When I reached the shore, I tried to stand up, but when I stand up, the whole world is spinning, so I lay down and crawled the last part.
The other boys called to him from the boat to see if he had made it, but he was so weak and could only call out to them that he was alive. After reaching the island, they were desperate to quench their thirst and started hunting seabirds, so they could drink their blood and eat their eggs. They were alive, but not much more than that. They found a sword ledge where they could sleep with some protection from the elements. They also quickly realized that they were not only stuck on an island, they were stuck on a tiny beach on this island. It was impossible to swim around to other parts of the island, and a steep cliff blocked their way over land. They collected rainwater and drank bird blood when they didn't have any water, and without the birds, they would have died on that beach. They tried to find a way over the mountain, but were always beaten back. After trying for several days, they found a cave 800 feet up. In the cave they found old knives left from the people who once lived there, also indicating that there was a way through. This positive boost helped them regain their strength, and they soon reached the top of the mountain. This was a huge game changer. They now had access to the rest of the island and everything that was there. The world they now entered was something completely different. Here they found enough food with plants and chickens that had survived after the island was left without a population. They didn't have any matches, but one of them remembered how to make fire the old-fashioned way. They spent several hours trying, and when it finally worked, the fire would never go out. Their first real meal in almost 2 weeks was exquisite. They built a house in old island style and brought the fire with them inside. But the fire inside also drew other guests, rats. But so overjoyed by their sudden turn of luck and new situation, they ignored them. The kids agreed to work in teams of 2, drawing up a strict roster for garden, kitchen, and guard duty. Sometimes they quarreled, but whenever that happened they solved it by imposing a timeout. Their days always began and ended with song and prayer. Kolo fashioned a makeshift guitar from a piece of driftwood, half a coconut shell and 6 steel wires salvaged from their wrecked boat, an instrument Peter has kept all these years, and played it to help lift their spirits. And their spirits needed lifting. All summer long it hardly rained, driving the boys frantic with thirst. Worst of all, Stephen slipped one day, fell off a cliff and broke his leg. The other boys picked their way down after him and then helped him back up to the top. They used an old Polynesian way of splinting, and set his leg using sticks and leaves. Sione joked.
Don't worry, we'll do your work, while you lie there like King Taufahau Tupou himself.
After 4 months, he had a scar, but he could walk again. The boys held the fire going and kept lookout for any passing ship. They also built a raft to try to escape the island, but it was crushed on their first attempt against the surf. After that, the mood among the boys fell again. They realized they might be marooned on ʻAta forever. They hunted the chickens on the island and got eggs from them and used for food, sometimes also eating the chickens. To keep fit, they played tennis matches and had physical exercises every day, knowing that if they got lazy, nature would get them. One day they found the body of what must have been one of the last people living on the island. They buried him and all hoped they wouldn't end up like him. But this event also made the boys realize they needed to plan for a life at the island, something that might last for the rest of their lives. They started planting new banana plants and other vegetables and taking care of the little stock they had. Life continued in its monotone way for the boys, but they always kept the fire alive, exercised and tried to fill the days with different activities. Then, one day, they heard one of the boys screaming,
"Boat! There is a boat out there!"
The boys started screaming to try to catch the people on the boat's attention. They lit a fire and threw themselves in the water, swimming towards the boat. Tota says,
Initially, Warner and his crew were fearful. We all hopped in the water and swam out to the boat, but Mr. Warner did not put the ladder down, because they were all scared of us. But luckily we could speak to him in English, and he gave us a few questions, and showed us a few photos from Tonga, among them a photo of our queen. We said, yes, that's our queen, Queen Salote. He was sort of testing and trying to find out if what we're telling him was true.
By the time we arrived, Captain Warner wrote in his memoirs, the boys had set up a small commune with a food garden, hollowed out tree trunks to store rainwater, a gymnasium with curious weights, a badminton court, chicken pens, and a permanent fire, all from handiwork, an old knife blade and much determination. But this wasn't the end of the boys' little adventure, because when they arrived back in Nuku'alofa, police boarded Peter's boat, arrested the boys and threw them in jail. Yes, you heard me right. After being marooned on a deserted island for 15 months, they were thrown in jail. Mr. Tanyela Uhila, you know the butt-opening guy, whose boat the boys had borrowed 15 months earlier, was still furious, and he decided to press charges. No wonder people thought he was an asshole. Peter came up with a plan. It occurred to him that the story of their shipwreck was perfect Hollywood material. Peter knew people in TV, so he called up the manager of Channel 7 in Australia and sold him the rights to the story. He paid Mr. Uhila £150, about £1,400 in today's money, for his old boat, and got the boys released. The mood when the boys returned to their families in Tonga was jubilant, and almost the entire island of Hafiva, with a population of 900, had turned out to welcome them home. Peter was proclaimed a national hero and soon received a message from King Taufeahau, inviting him for an audience. The king thanked him for rescuing 6 of his subjects and asked if there was anything he could do for him. The captain didn't have to think long and said,
Yes, I would like to trap lobsters in these waters and start a business here.
The king consented and Peter commissioned a new ship. Then he granted the 6 boys the thing that had started it all, an opportunity to see the world beyond Tonga. He hired them as the crew of his new fishing boat. So what was the difference? Why didn't the 6 boys turn into Lord of the Flies? While the boys in the book and the films come to blows over the fire, those in this real-life version tended their flames so it never went out, for more than a year. They also quickly realized that if they were to survive, they had to cooperate and made teams of 2 that worked together, a cooperation that the boys in Lord of the Flies wasn't able to do. The Tongan boys were of course also fewer, reducing the risk of disputes between them, and keeping active with chores and games. But the most important reason is of course that Lord of the Flies is a fictional story, meant to engage and entertain us, but also to reflect on the nature of human beings when people are in extreme situations. Peter Warner has been criticized by many for making money of the story of the boys. But Tota has a different view and has nothing but praise for Warner, with whom he has since worked, and whom he considers a friend. For Tota's part, he would love to make a little money from the story if he can, saying he is only prepared to share highlights of his story at this stage.
I don't want anybody to tell my full story until I publish a book from it, and in this way, maybe make some living for my grandchildren.
But he is unhappy that anyone is blaming Warner.
I know a lot of people saying things about Mr. Warner, because he makes a lot of money from our story. Who cares? If no Mr. Warner, we would never have survived. If no Mr. Warner, we wouldn't be here to tell our story. If Mr. Warner makes some money from it, good luck for him, that's my opinion. I would tell everybody, please shut up.
I hope you found this presentation interesting, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And please check out my other videos on this channel, to see if there are other topics you find interesting. And I hope to see you in the next one.